So this is it. This is strategic pluralism theory, and you guys kind of have to wrap your heads around this first. Now, so when I talk about hypergamy with women, I've got to point this out because this has been like really kind of bastardized recently by Alex from Date Psych, and I'm not going to flame Alex here because I just think he's confidently ignorant about the red pill and confidently ignorant about what we think is hypergamy, what we think is dual mating strategy versus mate shifting hypothesis. Okay. But before we get to that point, I have to make a comparison here about, between a distinction between hypergamy and strategic pluralism theory. Okay. Hypergamy, only women are hypergamous. Okay. There's I've written constantly about this. Only women are hypergamous. People want to say, well, don't men and women don't they want the best of the best of the best? It's like, well, yeah, but that's making comparisons. Hypergamy is specifically, at least the expanded definition of hypergamy is specifically about sexual market value and sexual strategies, mating strategies. Okay. For women always date up. Hypergamy never seeks its own level. It's always looking for the bigger and better deal, which is exactly why I was explaining earlier about the idea anyways, that women will never find the guy that they're not settling for. Even when they find a guy who they think is a great guy, there will always be that hypergamous doubt that he's not the best that she could have done. There's always like, oh, I should have tried harder to get with Chad back in my college days, because if I had locked him down, he was really the one. He was the one that got away. It's the premise of the alpha widow, right? The alpha widow is really just a story about the one who got away. He's the one I was supposed to be with, but it didn't work out. I couldn't lock him down. He was one of the 4.5%ers. He was a guy. He was an alpha male. He was a guy that other men wanted to be and other women wanted to fuck. He really loved me. If things would have gone differently, my life that could have been, but now I'm stuck with this piece of shit. Or maybe he's not a piece of shit. He's just not as exciting as the guy who used to, the helicopter pilot from fucking Brazil who used to fuck the shit out of me, and we had such a great time, and I'll never forget the dude ever again, and I'm going to secretly name my son after him, so I'll always be reminded of Dave, right? Or always be reminded of Chad. My son's name, I insisted that my son be named Chad because I always want to be reminded of Chad because he's the one that got away. Right? I mean, literally, women will do that. They will name their sons after the guy who fucked them really, really hard in college, and the guy that she's settling for, the guy whose last name she wouldn't take in marriage. That guy is the one who's kind of like always going to be the one he's the qualifier. He's the guy that has to fucking keep qualifying over and over and over again because he's never going to live up to the ghost of the alpha widow. So that being said, that's the hypergamous side of things. The strategic pluralism side is a little bit more interesting. This is the male side of all of that. Okay. So I'm going to read this to you. According to strategic pluralism theory, and this is by Gangstad and Simpson. Gangstad, I believe it's Stephen Gangstad, was one of the colleagues of Dr. Marty Hazelton's, who I quote quite often on this show, and I have quoted on my blog and in my books really since 2007. Even as far back as the So Suave days. But this is part of Gangstad's thing. Okay. According to strategic pluralism theory, men have evolved to pursue reproductive strategies that are contingent on their value on the mating market. Okay. More attractive men accrue reproductive benefits from spending more time seeking multiple mating partners and relatively less time investing in offspring. Ergo, more attractive men accrue better reproductive benefits from spinning plates, dating non-exclusively, fucking around, having multiple opportunities because they're higher value on that sexual market, on the sexual market scales, right? If you ever wondered why men tend to be more hierarchical in their thinking when they're organizing societies, when they're organizing businesses, organizing militaries, organizing competitive like sports teams and stuff like that. If you ever wonder why there's a hierarchy, look no further than strategic pluralism theory, because there are guys who are leaders of men and then there are followers. There are the 4.5%ers, and then there are the 20%ers, and then there are the 80%ers. Okay. And this is from a sexual market value perspective. I'm not saying from a social value perspective. Okay. So more attractive men accrue reproductive benefits from spending more time seeking multiple mating partners and relatively less time investing in offspring. Okay. That's the baby daddy. That's the one who fucks the single mom, your single mother that you decided to step up and be this, not the stepdad, but the guy who stepped up. That woman is getting with the guy who has more gets more reproductive benefits from seeking multiple mating partners. Got it. And less time investing in offspring. In contrast, the reproductive effort of less attractive men who do not have the same mating opportunities is better allocated to investing heavily in their mates and offspring, and spending relatively less time seeking additional mates. Lesser men who are less attractive, men who are lower value in the sexual marketplace, tend to put all their eggs in one basket, all of their efforts, all of their investment in one woman and in the offspring that either they produce or that were already produced, and now they're like a single mom, and now they're going to have sex with them, and they're going to hopefully have reproduction with that woman. Okay. So when we look at somebody like, say, Dr. Jordan Peterson, we just saw a minute ago on video saying, like, I have a tendency to pedestalize women. Yes, because you are a less attractive man who does not have the same mating opportunities as more attractive men. Ergo, you invest more heavily in your mate, pedestalization, and offspring, and spending relatively less time seeking additional mates. So if you lack opportunity, if you lack sexual abundance, if you are not in the 4.5%, and you're in the 20%, it probably behooves you to do one of two things. Either put all your eggs in one basket and invest only in one single woman, and only put yourself wholeheartedly into raising the offspring that you have with that woman. It's probably in your better interests, because you do not have this, you don't know when your next mating opportunity is going to happen. Thus, that has an effect on how you see the sexual marketplace and how you see the nature of intersexual dynamics between men and women. So when a guy says it's only should be one man and one woman, and those guys who are in the 4.5%, those chads who are licking the ice cream, who are ruining it for the rest of us, they're immoral. And nothing works better than morality and ethics when it comes to intrasexual competition and intrasexual combat. Because what it is it's a technique to disqualify guys who are more attractive and accrue reproductive benefits from spending more time seeking multiple mating partners. One of those mating partners might be the woman that the less attractive man is actually now pairing with. He might even be raising her children or his children as a result of that situation. So it's men with abundance versus men who do not have that same abundance. Lesser attractive men, more attractive men. Now, Gangstad puts it in these terms because he is trying to kind of soften the blow. But really what this is, and I'm going to continue here with this because this is actually pretty good. Essentially, men follow an R or K reproductive strategy according to their perceived sexual market value. Since the majority of men fall into the low sexual market value side of the reproductive equation, social conventions that served those men's reproductive interests had to be developed and standardized. The resolution of men's existential fear needed to be instituted and standardized to ensure the largest number of men could be relatively certain that the children they sired were going to be their own biological children. Enter monogamy. That's why we have marriage. That's why we have those things. That's why we have a formalized sense that marriage is really just a formalization of socially enforced monogamy. Like Christians, sorry, you don't have a monopoly on marriage. Jews, Muslims, you don't have a monopoly on marriage. Like I said, we've been doing marriage in multiple cultures that are isolated from one another for a very fucking long time. Marriage is a formalization of monogamy. That's what it boils down to. So you can say you take that up with your God or your Bible or your holy book. The fact of the matter is that functionally, that's what marriage is about. It's formalizing monogamy. This bitch is my bitch, and this man is my man. Okay. But what I was going to get at is the R or the K reproductive strategy. Now there's the R reproductive is putting all of your eggs in one basket. It is investing in your I hope I'm getting this right. I think I'm getting this right. R versus K relates to selection combinations. Okay. So really what it comes down to is if there is, I believe it's okay, so K selection. K reproductive selection is you only have one offspring or very few offspring, and so therefore you have to put a lot of energy and effort into those offspring. The R selection is you fuck a lot and you have a lot of babies, right? If it's like mice or rats or rabbits, like they fuck like rabbits, that's an R selection reproductive process. K selection is we only got one of these kids and we better protect it and we better put all of our energy into this one, into making sure that this kid survives and thrives with this offspring. Okay. So that's K selection versus R selection. However, if you look at the difference between, like, say, strategic pluralism theory, you've got the CADs and the CHADs, the 4.5%ers who follow technically an abundance theory or abundance mating strategy, which is have a lot of sex with a lot of women, reproduce in number. A K selection for men are the men who are less attractive and have to keep qualifying over and over again so that they can put all of their energy and their time and their investment into their children. But the difference between those two is there are more guys who are lesser men, who are lesser attractive than there are guys who are actually more attractive. So a guy like Justin Waller can afford to have an R selection. I'm using this figuratively, an R selection mating. It's not like he's actually fucking like rabbits. Well, maybe he is. Fucking like rabbits, right? Or I should say reproducing like rabbits, versus the guy who is the K selection guy. So bear that in mind as I keep going with today's lesson here, which we're coming up on it. So really what it comes down to is when we're talking about friends with benefits, you're still having almost like the best of both worlds. That's why I say that guys who have the sports fucking gene, the guys who are the 4.5%ers, they have an easier time with friends, or with developing a friends with benefits situation than certainly lesser men. And I use the term loosely, the 20%ers, the 80%ers, right? If you're a 20%er, if you got into a friends with, I would love to know if you're like one of these guys who has to keep qualifying all the time. I wonder how common it is for guys in sort of like the qualifiers category have with actually developing a friends with benefits situation with a woman versus a guy who looks like Justin Waller. I keep using that name. The guys who are in the 4.5% probably have a much easier time developing something like that than anyone else.